Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Curriculum and Student Success Committee of Portland Public Schools. It is 7:30 on December 8th, and we are meeting in Zoom. I am Julianne Opperman, Chair of the committee and District 3 representative. And tonight we are going to hear about the Grade 9 Academy, the post-secondary planning, 8th grade and 9th grade educator collaboration, and reporting structures for academic performance. So far, I am joined by committee member Lena. I expect to pretty soon that we will see Vice Chair Bondo and committee member Usura. But we are already joined with Dr. Cheryl Proctor, Chief of Schools and Academics, Dr. Abdullahi Ahmed, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Schools, Haley Didrikson, Senior Director of Data and Technology, and we should have, and I think we are going to hear from Pamela Otuma Toms, Director of Secondary Innovation and Outcomes, who is in the attendees. She should be coming over in a minute. I would like to know if there's, before we begin our agenda, if there's any public comment that anyone would like to make. If you are a participant in the attendees and you wish to comment, please raise your hand and we will recognize you. I'll give you another minute or half a minute for that.
I am not able to see the list of attendees. Are you able
I
to
don't
see the
either.
list?
I don't see them.
Do you see from the bottom?
Oh, now I see
I can
two.
see them. I
Can
see
you,
three.
Claire, Kristen, and Pamela are over there.
Yeah,
could you,
Pamela should come
could,
over to
as a
panel.
panelist, could you make Pamela a panelist? I don't see even a list of names to make Pamela a panelist.
I'm not a host, so I can't do it.
I see it now. Somebody changed something so that I can see it now. Got it. Let me work on that. All right.
Joined by Isra Ali, which is wonderful.
Great.
So, but I still do not see anyone who wishes to make public comment. So we will close public comment this evening. And Dr. Proctor, it's your business now.
All right, great. Good evening, everyone. So glad to have you with us. I'm going to prepare to share my screen so that we could talk about our agenda items for this evening. So give me one moment as I open up my windows. Okay. All right, great. And so I'm going to share. Great. All right. Can everyone see my screen now? All right, so this evening we're going to go ahead and talk about our strategic plan 2.0. And as far as the agenda, what that means is looking at grade 9 academy, post-secondary planning updates, 8th to 9th grade collaboration update, and reporting structures for academic performance. And then we'll have question and answer. With our topics at hand. Know that 9th grade academy will be an update to a reporting that was done earlier on in, I believe, August or September, as well as post-secondary planning will serve as an update. We'll get new information on 8th grade, 9th grade educator collaboration and what that looks like currently and where we are in that work. And then we're going to talk about reporting structures for academic performance. We are going to highlight some data points that would be very interesting and of interest to the committee, and then know that staff would be looking for any recommendations or direction from the committee. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Pamela. I wanted to note who we have with us, our team. Before I do that, team members, if you could come off of mute and just introduce yourselves, please, and your role. And we could start with Dr. Ahmed. We could start with,
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
My name is Abdullahi Ahmed, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools, and I'll pass to Pamela.
Hi, everyone. Pamela Otunu Thompson, Director of Secondary Innovation and Outcomes. Haley?
Hi, everyone. Haley Didrikson, Senior Director of Data and Technology, and I'll pass to Jesse.
Everybody, this is Jesse Applegate. I'm Senior Director for Special Education and Student Support. Good to see you all.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And I'm going to turn it over to Pamela Otunu Thompson, who's going to start with Ninth Grade Academy. Then she'll continue on with the following two topics, which would be post-secondary planning, and then the grades 8 to 9 collaboration. Pamela?
All right, great. And anytime I have the opportunity to sort of share the foundation of this work, I'd love to do so. So we could just back up a couple slides just to highlight the portraits. That would be, oh, are
Is
they?
it forward or back?
It's back, but it looks like it's not there.
Not there.
That's okay. I can just speak overview to it. Everyone has seen the portraits who's on this call. So you can just jog it from memory. But I just wanted to just bring us back to the fact that we have the Portrait of a Graduate, which outlines the essential skills and dispositions we want every Portland Public School student to really develop by the time they graduate. And these competencies, self-advocate, just community builder, lifelong learner, skilled communicator, problem solver, and being prepared for success represent our community's vision, not just the district's, but the community's vision of what students need to thrive in college, career, and community. And so this portrait is not a separate initiative. It is the foundation of all the work that you tonight will hear about. It guides our grade 9 academy structures, right, our post-secondary planning efforts, and our 8th to 9th grade collaboration. Each section of this presentation connects back to these competencies and how we're building the conditions for students in a meaningful way. And so just really briefly also just to highlight, so remember we have the Portrait of a School Community, which outlines the conditions that must be in place for every student to thrive. And so these conditions, as a quick reminder, are rich and numerous opportunities for learning, maintaining a strong focus on community building, and ensuring access to a challenging and meaningful curriculum. They also emphasize instruction that supports each student as an individual, aligning supports for each student's future plan, which you'll see in the post-secondary planning aspect, and maintaining adequate staffing, structures, and resources. And just as important as creating an environment where staff can thrive and ensuring we have high quality facilities that meet the needs of our students. So I want to just share that we are actively collaborating with our high school principals and middle school principals to design a multi-year implementation plan for both the Portrait of a Graduate and the Portrait of a School Community. So as you know, these portraits are living documents that should guide the work we do across all grade levels, K through 12. Through a backwards design approach, we began this work with high school, and we will now start intentionally extending and aligning this work in the lower grades. So this framework is the foundation for the work you will hear about throughout tonight's presentation as it shapes systems and practices and supports. So I just wanted to share that as background information to keep in mind.
And if am I on mute? Director or board member Opperman was so kind to drop those two in the chat so that we could open them up and view them as well. So thank you, Pamela, for that reminder and overview.
All right, thank you. So this next section here focuses on grade 9 academy. As you know, just a quick reminder from previous committee meetings, ninth grade is a pivotal transition year that sets the foundation for a student's high school experience and long-term success. And so we're going to talk about what conditions are in place and how we're supporting students and what teams are doing in that work. So in this slide here, just to briefly share that our teams are monitoring student progress to ensure every ninth grader stays on track. We use a clear district-wide definition of on track, and that's students must pass all 4 core academic classes and at least 1 elective. So for the core academic, we're talking about math, science, social studies, and history. Sorry, math, science, ELA, and social studies. This gives a consistent way to ensure that we're measuring progress across all the high schools equitably. In addition to course grades, we're also looking at these early warning indicators that help us identify really students who may need support well before they fall off track. So those indicators are any suspension at all and attendance below 90%. By monitoring both academic and behavioral data, we're able to intervene early, coordinate supports for students, and keep more students on a path towards success. And so on this next slide here, I want to highlight how our weekly grade 9 academy meetings function as a backbone for the early intervention system. So these meetings ensure that every high school has a consistent structure for monitoring student progress and coordinating support. So each week, cross-disciplinary teams review key data. That data is attendance, grades, and behavior to clearly identify which students may need additional support, as well as those whose progress should be celebrated. This routine gives us a shared real-time understanding of how our ninth graders are doing. So teams then coordinate specific interventions by assigning next steps, clarifying who's responsible, and ensuring follow-through. This keeps our work organized and prevents students from slipping through the cracks, essentially. We also look for emerging patterns or trends across classes or cohorts of groups of kids. So when we spot instructional or engagement challenges, it allows us to adjust practice and supports proactively. These meetings are also used to align on upcoming priorities. So where there's advisory planning or family outreach or community progress, finally, teams share observations about student well-being and overall school culture, which is essential in supporting the whole student, not just the academic indicators. So working really closely with our director, this work really entails what lies in the field of our director of climate and culture, as well as our director of academics, right? So all of us beginning to work closely together to make sure progress is being made. So just to summarize, the school reported data for on-track data we received on November 18th. Here it is on the slide. While the data shows positive signs of progress, just want to note that it's important to frame these percentages carefully. First, each school's on-track percentage reflects the data they submitted based on their current grading practices and course expectations. Because these practices vary across our 3 high schools, the percentages cannot be used for direct comparison. So I just want to make that clear. Instead, they should be viewed as individual snapshots of how each school is progressing towards supporting ninth graders. So we don't compare across schools, but schools are using it to make progress internally. So Casco reported that 88% of students are currently on track. Deering reported 78% are on track, and Portland reported that 76% are on track. Again, these figures are helpful for internal reflection and planning within each school, but differences in grading standards and course structures mean they cannot be comparable across schools. This is why the work to align common definitions, expectations, and reporting structures across the district is essential.
And I thank you so much for saying that, Pamela, because what I do want to underscore right here is that we will get more information in Haley's presentation about just what you're saying, Pamela, how the differences in grading expectations and courses impacts how we're able to also view data. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Next slide, please. So this slide is really just to highlight what schools are sharing they need most in order to strengthen the consistency and effectiveness of grade 9 academy implementation. So first, schools are asking for more accessible, user-friendly data systems. Right now, accessing accurate data, up-to-date data takes significant time, and the current tools are not intuitive. This slows down team meetings and makes it harder to quickly identify students who need support. Related to that, team leads often cannot run reports on their own, which limits their ability to prepare for meetings, monitor trends, and proactively flag issues. And as a result, some teams are relying primarily on teacher observation instead of a full picture of attendance, grades, and behavior data. Schools also expressed a need for support with best practice interventions, both in expanding the menu of strategies teams can draw from and in having a clear way to track whether interventions are effective over time. To support alignment and build capacity, we have scheduled district-wide grade 9 academy meetings, and they fall on January 28th, February 25th, and April 29th. And these sessions will help us develop shared systems, provide training on interventions, and improve consistency across schools. But there's a longer-term conversation on sort of RTI and MTS systems to support this work that'll be happening. All right, so this next section really transitions us to post-secondary planning. So I'll walk you through what's happening here. So in this slide, we just highlight how our high schools are structuring their post-secondary work to ensure every senior leaves with a clear and actionable plan. First, each school's post-secondary team meets twice a month. These meetings are intentionally designed to be data-driven. Teams review key indicators such as FAFSA completion, college and career program applications, and programs toward graduation requirements. This allows them to identify students who need outreach or intervention, whether they have no documented plan, are missing key steps, or need additional advising or support. The team then coordinates upcoming activities, including college and career fairs, workshops, financial aid nights, and targeted advisory or crew or classroom lessons as well. So these events are aligned to address the specific needs that are emerging from the data. A core part of these meetings is clarifying adult roles and next steps. Counselors, teachers, JMG specialists, and community partners coordinate responsibilities so students receive consistent proactive support rather than fragmented efforts. And I just want to say also our Make It Happen coordinators are part of the team doing this work with the counseling team. Finally, just want to note that teams monitor progress towards school-wide goals and adjust the strategies as needed. They've been proactively doing that. This ensures we stay responsive, allocate resources where they're most needed, and maintain a clear focus on ensuring every senior graduates with a strong post-secondary plan. All right, so just wanted to share that the way that we're strengthening our post-secondary systems by ensuring that we're trying to ensure that teams have some consistent coaching, collaboration, and professional learning that's happening to support the work. So first, all post-secondary planning teams meet twice each month. These regular touch points help students stay aligned on goals, monitor student progress, and coordinated efforts, as I mentioned previously. Team leads also receive monthly coaching from our RISE partners. So we've contracted with them to support this work. These individualized supports help leaders really to problem solve, refine systems, and bring best practices back to their teams. In addition, we convene district-wide post-secondary meetings throughout the year. So on September 25th, December 4th, January 22nd, March 12th, you can see the dates there, April 30th and May 28th. These sessions are convened, and really the goal is that these sessions allow us to build shared practices, align expectations, and ensure every high school is moving forward together. And then finally, if you may remember that the RISE Post-Secondary Symposium was held back in October. And then our teams, some members of our teams did attend that. And our Portland Public School team was able to really engage with districts across New England, gather some new strategies, and bring back insights to continue to shape our work. And we'll be sharing some of those key learnings with our school leaders and folks that were not able to attend. We'll be doing that in January. Okay. So I want to highlight some data in the next 3 slides here. So first, I want to highlight how Casco Bay High School is monitoring senior progress toward post-secondary readiness. So this data gives us a helpful snapshot. It's not final, but it guides our team's focus, where our teams focus their efforts. So you can sort of get a sense of what they're tracking here. And these are sort of school reported data as well. So first, looking at post-secondary plans, you can see that Casco is showing high engagement. As of November 6, 96% of seniors, 85 out of 89 have identified a clear post-secondary plan. The breakdown shows a wide range of pathways. You can see there are 57 students planning for a 4-year college, 18 for 2-year college, 2 for trade or technical school, 3 entering the workforce, 1 pursuing a certification program, and then 4 planning to transition to adult ed. And there's intentional collaboration happening there with adult ed so that they're advising students on their next steps as necessary. And then you'll see next, moving to applications. This is an area of active work. As of November 6th, we had 15.7% of seniors. 14 students had submitted at least 1 application. And then when we break that down, that's for 4-year college applicants, that's 25% had already submitted. For 2-year college applicants, submissions had not yet been made. So really this confirms that what the teams already knew, that really application support continued to be a major focus for November and December. And the team's goal was to have all students having at least submitted 1 application by their March to the post office date, which will be this coming Friday on March 12th. For FAFSA, 17% of seniors have reported completion at that time. And then finally, I'll note that the updated numbers from Casco on November 18th were that 97% had completed a post-secondary plan, 24% had completed at least 1 application, and then 17% had completed the FAFSA. So this demonstrates really steady progress in that every week we'll see growth. And the goal is that we have all students having submitted an application by the end of the school year. All students who are eligible, I should say. So next slide for we're there, Deering. So here, as you're looking at Deering's, you'll see similar data. For the overall plan identification, there were 84% of students had identified a post-secondary plan. And then if you see the breakdown there, 107 students, right, plan to attend a 4-year college, 37 a 2-year college, and then a smaller number of students planning for trade, technical programs, the military, or the workforce. 11 students anticipate transitioning to adult ed at this time. So then if you look at the applications, you can see the data right there. 26% of seniors had submitted an application, at least 1 application, I should say. And you can see the breakdown right there as well. For time, I'll just leave that on the slide there. And then for FAFSA completion, you'll see that 12% of students had completed the FAFSA as of November 6th. Okay. And then on November 18th, I will share that the team gave an update that the post-secondary plan completion percentage had risen to 93.5. Right, again, showing progress that's being made in this work. So Portland, similar. now you're familiar with how these data slides look, so you can view it more quickly. But I'll just highlight again that November 6th, 89% of seniors had completed their post-secondary plan, right? And if you see the breakdown there, 122 students were planning to pursue a 4-year institution at 41, 2-year, along with smaller but important numbers planning to attend trade or technical programs, military service, and the workforce certification programs or postgraduate year. And then for applicants who had submitted at least one application, 15.3% had done that at the time. And then if you can see the breakdown there as well when you look at the data. And then if we go to FAFSA, as of November 6th, 9% had completed the FAFSA. That's about 33 students who had reported that they had completed it. Again, this is students reporting that they've completed it. We won't know for sure until the end of the school year in May from FAME data, which students actually have completed. But for now, to help us do the work, we're relying on students reporting to us and sort of sharing that they've done that on their screen. Finally, I just wanted to share that on November 18th, Portland gave an update that 97% had completed a plan. We had a 68% had applied to at least one college, great, and then 22% had completed the FAFSA. So really intentional work happening across the schools there. Again, just wanted to highlight this shows strong week-to-week progress. Teams are ensuring that they have meetings scheduled with each senior to do this work, and they're using data to do that. They have a spreadsheet that they're using to track progress. Okay, so just want to highlight here what we're hearing and where the challenges lie as we continue to support schools in this work. So FAFSA completion. As you saw, the current level of district-wide support is not yet sufficient to meet the scale of need, especially in a linguistically diverse district like ours. First of all, the FAFSA completion requires significant time, individualized guidance, and consistent family engagement. For many of our families, the process is complex, not because of the financial aid content alone, but because it often requires real-time interpretation, detailed explanation, trust building. You need the student and the parent there to complete the entire process. So district one-time events are helpful. We have those, they're helpful, but they're not enough to meet the needs of families who require more individualized or language-specific support. We also know that, right, that other districts are facing similar challenges and have moved to include a FAFSA task force in their model. So these, the task force is made up of educators who host evening and or Saturday workshops with interpretation built in. And to make an approach like this effective, districts provide sustained financial support to compensate staff time and ensure reliable interpreter coverage as well. This is especially important in Portland Public Schools. So, and as you saw in the data, post-secondary planning, the FAFSA completion applications advising requires extensive time, coordination, and emotional labor from our teams. So I just want to say, I just want to give a shout out to our counselors and our post-secondary team, because that also includes our Make It Happen coordinators, our JMG folks that and our educators in the buildings. That our counselors leading this work and planning teams are devoted to this work because they deeply understand its impact on students' futures. Their roles are essential. And I just want to share that now that we're diving in and they're committed to this and we're ensuring that no student gets lost in this work, their roles are essential, and any reduction in staffing would greatly impact our ability to support students and families through this critical process. All right, so I'm going to move on to our 8th grade and 9th grade collaboration. In this section, we sort of talk about the work that's happening there. So we've built in a structure, right? And some of you know that we've had this going for a few years now, a couple years actually. We've built in a structure that allows collaboration between middle school and high school educators. They come together twice during the year. On November 19th, they came together, and then we'll come together again on March 25th. And I will share transparently that many of our educators after November 19th shared that twice a year is not enough and that they would appreciate more of these meetings. We do have other meeting structures that happen more frequently, so we can work to sort of bridge that gap and make sure these meetings are happening in those spaces as well, or these conversations, I should say, are happening in those spaces as well. And we're using current structures that exist. But first, the purpose of these joint sessions is really threefold. First, they allow teams to share key trends, academic, behavioral, and social emotional, to really ensure high schools have a clear picture of incoming students' strengths and needs. Second, the meetings create space to discuss curriculum and instructional approaches so that both levels understand how students are being prepared and where alignment can be strengthened across and vertically there. So these conversations also help us to clarify and reinforce shared expectations. That's really key there for what it means to be ready for high school. Ultimately, the goal is to identify and coordinate the supports that will help students enter ninth grade feeling confident, connected, with a strong foundation to stay on track from the very beginning. So really supporting the work of the Grade 9 Academy to ensure all students are on track. Next slide, please. So there was a broad, I'm sharing data here from November 19th. So there was a broad and intentional participation in our November 19th cross grade collaboration meeting. And again, the purpose was to bring together educators across roles to deepen our shared understanding of student needs as they transition from grade 8 to grade 9. And to do that effectively, we organized a session into like role groups so that colleagues could discuss trends, expectations, and instructional approaches with peers who share similar responsibilities. So those that attended included grade 8 and 9 core content teachers, our ESOL multilingual educators as well, special education educators, our school counselors, electives and unified arts educators, which included our world language, art, and music teachers. Social workers were included for the first time this time around. They had asked to be included in the past, but we had not had time to sort of coordinate that effort. And then assistant principals also were part of this work. And really, yeah, we can go on to the next slide there. So we are using the November 19th meeting just to give you an update on what has happened since then, or what's continuing to happen is we're using the November 19th meeting notes to drive focused, actionable next steps. So first, we're reviewing the themes, needs, and recommendations that emerged from each like role group. This reflection helps us to understand what is working, where there are gaps, and what supports educators identified as most urgent, and which aspects of the meeting our educators found most helpful as well, and which discussions were impactful. Second, based on those insights, we're determining what targeted supports we can provide this winter and early spring, whether that's professional learning, data tools, or clearer process to strengthen the 8-9 transition. Third, we're beginning to design the structures, discussion topics, and materials for the March 25th collaboration meeting that's going to be coming up. This ensures that the session is purposeful, aligned, and responsive to the needs of educators, and that collaboration session is really meaningful to every educator that attends. And just to note that during the March meeting, that'll occur after high school assignments are finalized. So having student level assignment lists in hand will allow teams to plan with much greater precision, really identifying specific supports, building stronger handoffs, and preparing to meet students where they are on day one. And the goal really is to move from reflection to action, building continuity and deeper alignment across the transition. All right, thank you for that. I'll give it back to you, Cheryl, who will pass it off. So
Thank you.
I can,
Yes,
yeah,
thank you so much, Pamela. Really appreciate it. We're going to continue in the conversation to talk about reporting structures for academic performance. And then you'll hear some reiteration of some points made by Pamela here. I'll turn it over to Haley for this part of the presentation.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Pamela, for queuing this up so nicely. So I just wanted to ground us in with a refresh on some of the same content we covered back in August, which seems like a lifetime ago at this point. But so just to sort of think about all the different data that we're looking at, and as Pamela was talking about with the ninth grade teams, there's multiple data points that we look at to think about whether or not a student is on track. And so when we think about academic performance in particular, just to refresh here, we have a bunch of different data that is available to us. And some of it is available in real time, the information that's really living in our Infinite Campus, our student information system, things like grades, unit assessments. And then we have our assessments, whether those be formative or summative, and some of those only happen once a year. And so we do have a lot of different pieces of information. When we talk about academic performance, this can refer to a student's proficiency in a content area. It could refer to the student's growth over time. We could also look, for example, at differences between students and student groups and trying to close gaps between different subgroups that exist. We could look at things sort of in a dichotomous way. Yes, no, a student passed a class or participated in a course, or did they graduate from high school? So we have a lot of different ways to understand students' academic performance. And we also can look at it in a wide wide range of grain sizes, whether that be at the classroom level or at the district or state level. And so I think all of these different perspectives give us some insights into how our students are doing. And so when we talk about data really of any kind, multiple data points are always better than one. And so oftentimes when our schools are looking at their academic data and our educators are looking at their data, we are certainly encouraging them to take into account sort of a wide variety of information. And so as Pamela was talking particularly about sort of post-secondary pathways, post-secondary readiness, we can, of course, look at things like course grades and GPA, whether or not students are taking AP classes, whether or not they're graduating. That can be a good indicator, a lagging metric of whether or not we prepared our students. And then another metric, looking really at whether or not students are enrolling in college, but actually, interestingly, the research really points to college persistence in the second year as a really powerful proxy for academic preparation as well. So there's a lot of different metrics we have available to us. There isn't one that can tell us the full story about a student's preparation or academic success. Okay, so hopefully this is all flooding back to you, remembering from August. So you may also remember that in August, I shared with you a quick preview of our PowerSchool data dashboard. And I think that from working with our schools, for many of them, the PowerSchool dashboard has been a tremendous tool for looking at things like attendance data or suspension rates, some of those metrics that are not connected to our academic data. And I'm sorry to report that several months later, we are still really struggling to get our academic dashboards to a place where they can be usable. And so as you can sort of see from the screenshot, I apologize, it's a little small. What really stands out, and you might remember from when we looked at it in August, is it's very, very cluttered. They're not conforming. So the data is technically accurate underneath it all, but in order to put our data into a dashboard where people can easily access it, and I know Pamela talked about the struggle for our educators trying to be able to access their data, it's very difficult to do so. And so this has been a dilemma, one that I've been personally grappling with, that the whole data team is grappling with, because we really want people to have access to academic data. And so how do we solve that challenge? Because we know that in order to have data-driven decision-making, you have to be able to actually access the data in a way that is meaningful and one can make sense of it. to the next slide. So the dilemma that I'm bringing to this group today is really about sort of a data dilemma that I've been wondering about as long as I've been at Portland Public Schools. And so I call this an apples to orange data problem. And so this issue is specifically at our secondary schools. So I'm going to name the fact that our elementary schools do have a standardized grading structure that uses Common Core standards to sort of determine their grading infrastructure. And so we can compare across buildings at the elementary level. Unfortunately, when we get into the secondary schools, and this sort of applies to middle and high school in different ways, when we see the messiness that shows up in the PowerSchool dashboard, it is sort of caused by the messiness of our grading structures themselves. And so the problem is we want to put these dashboards in the hands of educators so that they can be using the data in real time to drive their decision making. But it's really hard to create something that's going to work for every building and every educator if we don't have a standard practice. And so how this manifests is things like our grading scale system is different across all three high schools. We have a 0 to 100 scale, we have a 1 to 4 scale, we have a traditional A to F scale. And so it makes it impossible to we the academic outcomes across these buildings when we're using grade data. And unfortunately, from a data perspective, we have built into Infinite Campus these crosswalks that exist that technically say, okay, at this school, a 4 is equivalent to 99. We have that crosswalk that exists, so technically you can make it work, but our scales are at different grain sizes. So in some cases, we lose some of the nuance when we're creating that crosswalk. And so from a data perspective, this is less than ideal. So, I think practically speaking, and again, I'm speaking really as a data person, but also as someone who was a former teacher, that, having inconsistent grading practices across buildings, it just creates a challenge for being able to actually use data to inform decision making. I think that, ultimately our data for our academic data, again, specifically when we're relying on course grade data, and it's not the only type of academic data, but when we look at our sort of course grade data, we can't set district-wide academic goals, and we can't compare across buildings. And so what this also means sort of more deeply is that there's a lack of norm that exists about what is mastery or proficiency district-wide. We don't have an agreed upon definition. I think folks have, now I've obviously only been with the district for a year and a half, and I think that there are conversations that predate me where folks have talked about sort of what is proficiency, but I do think having an inconsistent grading system does inherently mean that there will be inconsistencies then in how they're operationalized. And then unfortunately, I think this inconsistency leads to inequities across schools. A student may be getting a grade that is considered passing in one school that may not be considered passing in another, or the grade that they receive may not translate to another school. And so the way in which students are being assessed could inherently be different based on the building that they attend. And then operationally, it's really inefficient. And so, the data team, unfortunately, has been spinning our wheels trying to make our data conform to a normalized structure so that we can use PowerSchool dashboards and make it easier for people to access their data. But it's really inefficient. It takes a lot of time to do that. We have a whole team of engineers over at PowerSchool that are also banging their heads against the wall, trying to figure out how to make this work for us. And so, to adopt a standardized system would add some efficiency to just how we process our data. And so I want to also place this sort of, I've fixated here on the grading policy, and I've been on a journey, looking at different data points in our system, and the data team has been trying to systematically QA or quality check all the different data points in our system. And so, grading data is just one example of a place where we have inconsistency, but when we go back in history, what I've learned in my time here is that Infinite Campus as a database system one that houses all of our data for the entire district, was not centrally architected, which is inconsistent with sort of best practice for how you set up a database in the first place. But the consequence of that is that we then have inconsistent data practices across schools in all different facets of our data. So for example, when looking at the calendar configurations for Infinite Campus, we have different numbers of instructional minutes across all of our secondary schools, which raises a concern about equity and student opportunities. We also, for example, have different naming conventions for courses across all of our buildings. And so we actually have to report on courses to the federal government as part of our CERDC reporting, and this has to then be manually matched to report accurately, and we may not even be accurate in our reporting because there's so much inconsistency across buildings. And it also makes it hard for us to say, for example, is every student having access to Algebra 2 during their high school experience, because we just don't have a conventional name across buildings. And so there's a dilemma here that is sort of multifaceted. There's a technical challenge, right? The data infrastructure, the way we've decided to set up our data schema, or the definitions that we use and the naming conventions we use are inconsistent. But that's a technical challenge. And that's certainly one that we can chip away at. It took us many years to get here, so it's going to take us a few years to get out of it, but we can tackle that sort of one bite at a time. But I do think that we have to address both the technical challenges as well as the adaptive challenges. And those are really more connected to the policy and the beliefs and sort of the way in which we got to this place in the first, got here in the first place. And so it has to be, I think, a multi-pronged solution to improving our data quality that combines both the sort of technical work that the data team has been so diligently chipping away at, and also some policy and cultural shifts in how we operate. So I'm shifting here in how we have, as a committee, historically operated, and I want to bring it to this group, the Brain Trust, to have a conversation, a dialogue. So I put together some questions for us to grapple with together. I think the things that I'm wondering about is how important is it that, like, we as a district have comparable academic performance data across schools? Like, in our list of priorities, how important is that? Do we want to try to move toward a more common grading practice or philosophy to support this goal? And then I think, as a committee, having to weigh what are the potential benefits of moving in this direction versus the challenges of trying to adopt a universal standardized policy. And so I'm putting those out, I think they kind of are all connected. So I'll stop talking and let others chime in.
Thank you, Haley. Those are great questions, and this has been some very, very good information. We have a lot. We actually have a range of information, and I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense to make sure we've covered the simple questions, the first part from Pamela. Not that they're simple, Pamela, but in the general, and then hit the heavy ones at the end, because I think that might help. So Mickey and Maya and you, Sarah, is there anything in the previous slides that you have a question on?
All
Mickey?
right. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for that great presentation. Thank you, Hailey. This is why it was all my concern for years. Thank you. Thank you so much. What you just raised is just amazing. So I have 3 questions, and I think you just get some of those answers. So I think my questions, the first question, I think Pamela, Dr. Ahmed, or Dr. Proctor, one of you can just respond to me. When I look at the slide 5, 7, and I see the lack of data accessibility to the teachers. So I just want to hear some takeaways from either of you to understand, are we look at the professional judgment, transparency, and accountability, especially when it comes to the grading system. Because that's the way I see like a conflict between the data and the humanity conflict, basing on each judgment. And then the teacher has assumed on the grading. So are we holding those outcomes? Are we holding the staff or teachers accountable to those outcomes?
Do you want me to start and then someone else will continue? So I'll just emphasize what I had shared in the slide before is that that's a great question and it makes it very challenging. It is challenging to hold teachers accountable because of the difference that exists across the schools. And even in some instances within one school, there's differences in terms of grading and expectations, even within one school. So then as we look at the data or we have discussions, it's really hard to hold people accountable or determine what's happening and what support students are receiving. So I find that's a great question. And I will say that as I sit in these team meetings, it is sometimes raised even by teachers that they are also frustrated that they can't compare what's happening in their classroom or their grade book to their own colleagues as well.
All right. All right. So we have to check on it. I think what Hallie just mentioned about different area or questioning that we have to improve the system, I think is going to remove those other barriers. So thank you to have that small explanation.
Yeah, and
so my second question is about excuse me?
Yes, I was just going to add just a couple of sentences to that response, just to kind of, in alignment to Pamela's response, is that, we do have an emerging practice. It is a part of our strategic plan. Everything in this presentation points back to what we say our strategic priorities are. Yes, in the 2.4, which is focused on high school and post-secondary success, but also in our 5.1 strategic initiative that really focuses on data and data use. And so while we are also depending on use of data, in addition with professional judgment, that professional judgment oftentimes should in and of itself be aligned to some form of evidence or data piece. And so, really trying to balance the two is really important because that's where the accountability will be able to be flushed in.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Proctor. And my second question is on the FAFSA task force. Then you just mentioned around like all the districts are doing. So what we huge barriers beside on having a budget, then we can have the same. Can you hear me?
We're having troubles. I don't know if you have a
Oh,
mic
my
that you're
goodness.
using. No, it's just a crackling. I don't know what it's coming from.
Oh, really?
So if you know what it's.
I have no idea. I
go
think I
ahead.
had the same issue on the policy meeting. So let me just put some
It
headphones.
seems like it fixed itself. It seems to have fixed
You're
itself.
fine now. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
With my headphones, so let's see, maybe better. So for the FAFSA tax folks, then you just mentioned then all the district they're using. So what are our specific barriers to implement the same standards of families? Because when I see what most of the family who are really in need to have those FAFSA completed, that's the one need translation, interpretation, because they are on the marginal side. So I just wonder why we cannot have the same kind of FAFSA tax folks implemented here in our district.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we certainly can have it implemented, and so it would require having our teachers and our counselors able to support alongside our interpreters, because Our interpreters can't do it on their own because there needs to be that knowledge as well of the FAFSA and the steps that are needed to complete it. And we need our counselors and our educators who know that work as well. So they need to work together to do that. Now that the challenge, I will emphasize again, is that during the course of the school day, there isn't time to be able to sit down and walk a student and family through it. That's that time doesn't exist. So that's where we need time outside of the school day in the evening or on Saturday to do that. The challenge is we need to be able to financially support it. So offer our educators some additional pay hours, right, to be able to come and support that work, as well as our interpreters to be able to offer that. So what we need to determine is what we're working on right now, I will share, is we're working on creating sort of um, an explanation or a sort of a template on what that task force needs to look like and who would be a part of that work and how much money would be needed to at least pilot it. So our teams are working on sort of putting that together with the support of our RISE network folks who have supported this work in other districts. So we're putting that together, and one thing we can do is present that to the committee to sort of see what the ask would be and really to pilot it and then think about, and also collect data, right? Which families are being impacted? What's the impact? To think about how do we move this or grow it in following years. But it's not too late to do that this year. Okay.
Anything else, Mickey?
Thank
Lost
you.
you
I
completely.
think last question is for Jess. On the special
We are not
education
hearing you.
and IEPs.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Special education IEPs. I think I just want to. Yes. My
You're
question is
frozen.
for Jess. I think I just need to have some clarification on the special education and IEPs students, because when I look at Hallie slide 24, and I see we are lacking some norms here. Yes. So the norms are so challenging. So I wonder the way we are defining proficiency through across our different population or student population, and especially special education and IEP students. So do you see what we're doing now is just we are assessing the growth versus the achievement because of those because of lacking the norms of grading system here, especially for those special education students.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. I think, when it comes to, well, I guess I could answer it. You could look at it two ways, right? So if you're just talking about looking at our district or school, data, then we would certainly look at, special education students in the same way, right? We'd be looking at their proficiency on like testing or whatever the metric is, alongside their general education peers. But when we're talking about it in the context of how maybe teams are making decisions for students, right? Like,
Right.
are they able to, be engaged effectively with general education, right, in the classroom? Because those are IEP team decisions, there is, and their special education teachers, but also their general education teachers are involved in those decisions. I think teams are looking at it, it's on sort of a lack of a better term, like a case by case basis to figure out, do we think the student is making, sufficient progress? And it's really sort of, they would look at it as compared to their typically developing peers, right? And that would be a judgment call they'd make. So I do think that this lack of norms concept, sorry to give you a long-winded answer here. I think the lack of norms concept, certainly could have an impact on that. But I do think because you have that individualized team approach, they
Right.
do work through it pretty effectively as a team. to determine
Okay.
how a student's doing
Yeah.
on a
So
case by case.
we are assessing the growth versus the achievement with those specific students
Hmm.
because
Well,
it's more individualized
yes.
than
Well, I think growth on and progress on IEP goals is what is a key thing teams are looking at when they're making decisions for students.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Mhm.
Sure.
You're most welcome. Member Lena?
Thank you. So this is a comment for Pamela. I just want to tell you that every time I hear you talk about the portraits, I just think it's such a great description and a wonderful way to highlight all of the good work that's being done in Portland Public Schools. As a board member, I've heard about the portraits a lot, and it's just so great. But as a parent, as a parent of an elementary students, I don't think I hear about it ever. And I remember the first time I saw a document that you had of the portrait of the graduate, I was just like, wow, this is so great, like to see what the potential is for the number of years that we're going to be in Portland Public Schools. And I just would love if there's a way to get that information really out to elementary families. And something else I've been feeling as an elementary parent is that we don't really hear what's going on at the middle and high schools, and we don't feel as connected to the other schools in the district. We feel very connected to our own school, but I just would love for there to be more discussion at all levels of like what's happening at all levels. And I think elementary parents would love to see more of that. So if there's a way you can facilitate that through admin, sending out newsletters, I just think more is great. So thank you for sharing that tonight. And Dr. Opperman and I think Mickey, maybe you were at one of these meetings, but we've had meetings with some students at the high schools, and I remember hearing from them two things that senior planning, like they wish they had a lot of that stuff earlier. So doing all of the post-secondary work, starting it even earlier. And then also some stuff we heard was that they wish they started even some of this stuff earlier in eighth grade of like knowing what's ahead of them. They want more of it. They want to have more opportunity and to not be caught off guard, towards the end of their time in Portland Public Schools. So I think the connection that you're making with the eighth grade staff is great, and I think the students really they appreciate it and they want earlier information given to them earlier. And as an educator, I feel like there is it does a lot of good to have kids not think about the future all the time at too young of an age of like all the responsibilities of being an adult, but I think they do want to know more information as early as possible. So those are my two comments.
Can I respond to them just briefly?
Please do.
Yeah, just thank you very much. I just want to share just very briefly first, thanks for the acknowledgement of the portrait and the work that's happened there. And just with intentionality, we're moving into making sure it does reach elementary school. So not only there, but we're starting with making sure it shows up in all the initiatives and that initiative leads have that front and center and they're able to map how their initiatives sort of tie into the portraits. And then as I shared, right, so I've started having conversations, they're scheduled with the middle school principals to think about how do we design implementation into middle school. And then we'll do that as well for elementary. Thank you for putting in the plug intentionally for elementary as well. And then just to just respond briefly to your second point there is that's an excellent point that you make that it does need to start earlier. We've just started with seniors this year because it's our first real intentional effort to look at data to make sure we're not accidentally missing any kids and in doing this work, but it's going to be we're going to definitely dip down to looking at data at the 11th grade, 10th and 9th. And I will share at the symposium that we attended, districts that have been doing this work for longer, folks that are in my position at the district level, intentionally have woven it down to middle school. So there's actual work at the middle school level. And then there's some who've been doing it for longer who there's little pieces they also weave into elementary. in a way that's appropriate for each level. So there is work to be done, and we've started and excited about it, and we will move it down.
Great. Dr. Ahmed, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and thank you very much, Mylena, for asking this question or making this comment about the feedback from the students. And we heard from the students, and I attended actually a couple of these feedback sessions when the students were talking to the board members. And yes, the specific ones we shared with the schools in particular, and those were like very relevant and enlightening, and really like what is better than young people talking about what will benefit them, and having that meta kind of like level of like we need this. So it was great things that they when they said we need longer time, we need to start in our junior year, we need to know more about the college process. So that awareness is transferred or shared with the counselors actually. So I want to just, but thank you very much for bringing that comment.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
I think I want to say that all of these are good, and I would add some more, but I do want to get to Haley's discussion, because I think we've sort of talked about how important it is to be able to compare academic performance consistently across all of our schools. And I hear it in a couple places, and I would just want to make my 2 cents on this topic, is to say that it's important to get some framework at least to do it, but to permit some some range in it. As a department head of 11 people, trying to get 11 teachers to agree on a way of approaching something and dealing with, 9 through 12 grading and content was challenging. And so I think as going on to a wider range, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of real philosophical discussions and how to make some of the unique talents of the teachers there, not to erase that, and to make, or at least to make sure they don't feel that it's a race, that they can do some of their specialties, but as long as they don't teach, in elementary school, butterflies, for 3 years in a row. So, I mean, it's important, but the standardization would help in a lot of places. I know so I think it's important, but it's a difficult pieces, both 1 and 2, the first 2 questions. Did you want to add something to that, Maya?
I had a specific question for Haley about the Power School.
Sure.
So Haley, I'm just wondering about the grading system. I remember when I was teaching in another district, we were using the 1 through 4, and really had a hard time inputting that into Power School because it doesn't translate to the 1 to 100 scale. Like truly, it's not the same meaning. And I'm just wondering if the schools that are using that grading system have a way to accurately gather that data, and if a student gets a 100 on a test, that means that they are mastering the material. It doesn't necessarily mean they're exceeding the expectation. So that's not necessarily a 4, even though that 100 is comparable to a 4 in the Power School. Like, I forget what you called it, like a bridge or something. I guess I'm just wondering if you can talk a bit more about that. Do we have a computer program that does accurately capture the 1 through 4 grading system?
So you can input whatever you want technically into Infinite Campus. So we do have 1 to 4 scales. We have A, B, C, D, 50 scales. We have 0 to 100 scales. And the system is smart enough to let you do that. And it creates, it's called a crosswalk on the back end, where you can say a 4 translates to 100 and 99 and 98. And it has a bunch of numbers that it would sort of crosswalk to. So technically, yes. But I think what you described is, does 100 actually mean you've exceeded the expectation? That seems like there's some human discretion there. And that's where having a norm around when we say 100 or we say a 4, what does that mean in terms of what the student has demonstrated? And we do have within our grading system separation between the academic proficiency grades and the howls, the habits of work. So there is some of that parsing that's happening, but those are also not consistent across buildings. So what it means to get a 4 in your howls in one building doesn't necessarily match to other buildings. So I think there's this element, again, it's like technically yes, but also practically and how we interpret it and what it means varies by building.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a good example to share for maybe people that don't quite understand what I'm saying, which is like I had a student, I taught art, and the student was meeting all of the expectations on the rubric. And so I forget what the number was at the time, maybe like 85, so that it would translate to a 3 on her report because she was meeting the standard. And the parents were really confused because they were like, what is she doing wrong that she's not getting 100? And I'm like, she's not doing anything wrong. She's meeting the standard. She's right where she needs to be. Well, what else can she do? And I'm like, well, she could, I don't know. That's up to her. Like for her to, go above and beyond what I'm asking her. I can't tell her how to do that. And then it was just like this very confusing. And so I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's a helpful. I think sort of the philosophy piece comes in here, right? What is a proficiency-based education system, which is a different way of thinking about academic performance than a traditional grading system. So yes, that's baked into all of this as well.
Yeah. So that's the conversation in terms of what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Haley?
on the other end of that is the fact that what does 0 mean? There are teachers that feel strongly about zeros, and then there's teachers and there's a philosophy saying, that doesn't it means that you didn't turn it in or you just whatever. And how does that, how do you deal with that? And there are ways of dealing with that, but there is a limit to it. So I guess it's a big philosophical stuff. So I do think the recommendation of a grading task force is important. But I do think it's a big question. I think the policy question is the philosophy piece of what the district has for what it means to be a student in any particular grade and to do well. And one of the questions I was going to ask about something from Pamela was when we're talking about data and how people are worried and how academies are worried about making sure there are interventions. Are they worried about the students that could go beyond what's expected them? And are they incorporating those kinds of things, which I think fits more into what you're talking about, Maya, with the art and all. And so that spark, that extra piece, how do we reflect that and in a grade? So I think I don't know if anyone else has any other comments to make on the questions that Haley brought up, but I certainly do think that I think they're questions we can't answer tonight, personally. I don't think.
Yeah, I think, and with those questions that Haley raised for us to kind of think about and discuss, there was another slide. Haley, did you want to get to your last slide regarding your next steps and recommendations?
Sure. Yeah. So I think obviously I've spent a lot of time thinking about like what would we need to do to make this better, right? I think like having those philosophical conversations will be really important about what do we think grading should or could be. But I also think there's a philosophical conversation about should we be approaching this like a standardized method as a district. And so creating a space, a task force where those kinds of conversations could happen feels like a logical step. So my recommendation is really just to, for this committee potentially to sort of make the recommendation that a formal task force is assembled so that we can really grapple with the nuances of this conversation. I think having those voices of teachers and school leaders and students and families will be so critical for us to understand, one, how did we get here, right? There's a reason where we are where we are, and what would it mean to go in a different direction, and what do we value, and how do we want to ensure that those values are reflected in sort of the policy and the system we adopt. So I think the idea is that a task force would then sort of provide a formal recommendation to this policy where they've weighed those different perspectives, and because I do think that it would be very hard for this committee to take on writing a policy like this on our own.
I think you're absolutely right. I think and to do this, I would be most concerned that it doesn't get to be a committee that does a lot of talk around and come to no conclusion, which, as a 40-year educator, been there, done that, and who's involved in it. So I think it's what call them, let's say, wicked problem. So I think it's, I think it's an important thing to do. I'm not quite skeptical about something, a result, but I would hate for us to be so uniform. It's easy to be uniform, and that's a concern. So I think as a person who loves data, and I want it all, but I think I have a belief that a task force is an important piece. I don't know what you think, Mickey, Yusra, or Maya.
And I think I want to share, as you all are thinking about that question that Chair Opperman is raising, that the task force is really just about further exploration. If the committee desires for us as management to go back and kind of get a group of stakeholders together to engage in the conversation, to see what is possible, to see how we can just explore and bring back that information to the committee. It's not really an intention of the task force moving forward and making any particular decision, but just exploring further and bringing back more information to the
Sorry, I'm just going to chime in with one other piece here, which is, to me, in some ways, this is also a proof of concept for thinking about how do we think about standardization of policies across other aspects of our work. Because as I said, the grades data is just one of many data points that we can't compare across our buildings. And I think it's very hard for, as I think about how do we have a data-driven culture, we need to ensure that the sort of technical side is tended to. And so if a task force could take on something big like grading, maybe that provides a model for how we might tackle some of those other big challenges that we face in terms of technical issues that also have a policy component.
Vicky?
Yes, thank you. My only concern, I'm totally agree with the concept of having the stakeholder and bringing some information. I'm wondering about the time frame. Are we going to do that, and the costs? And also, projecting if we come out with any decision or policy or action driven, the cost for the year of fiscal 2027. So I'm just wonder about the process, having that, because that's a huge change. So we need to project on different, on the budget, and also on the on the time consuming and how can we collect, because the thing that I all the time be aware about, more we getting community involved, more we getting more feedback, and sometimes it's just all over the place. So we just need to condense to know exactly that's the time frame that we have, and how can we collect the maximum of ideas so we can combine and find the most common foundation where we can, align for what we want to do for the best of our grading system and improving the district-wide grading policy. Yes.
Thank you. Maya?
Yeah, I think a question that I have is sort of like a big picture question of I understand the desire to have data for like a data-driven decision making, but also what what other reasons are there to do this? Like, I know it's hard to measure like student outcomes across the schools, but if we're able to see that there's growth within the different schools and that the students are choosing those schools for certain reasons, and I guess my hesitation would be differentiating the schools to the schools have their different identities and students choose them for those reasons, and maybe like if we try to standardize too much then maybe that like would undo a lot of that. So I guess I would have more big picture questions of why we would want to do it in the first place.
I would think that we're not really proposing any changes to the uniqueness of the programs within the schools. I mean, we wouldn't be exploring that. It would just be what would be the hypothetical or the possibility of, the pluses, the benefits, and the challenges in moving from or deciding on 100-point scale or an ABCDF scale or a 1.1 through 4 scale, across the schools, not to touch the uniqueness or the program per se. Also, when I think about this, I also think about what are the implications for students who are planning for their post-secondary success, who are looking to go to college. Oftentimes we have to do college transcripts. And right now, each school does their own, I understand, transcripts to students. And then if there is this difference across the schools in how they're grading, if there's a difference across the schools in the courses, the instructional time, um, what are we compromising in terms of equity? And then what are we compromising in terms of um, equitable information being shared out on behalf of the student in terms of their college and university transcripts? Colleges and universities look at these transcripts and make translations of those transcripts. For example, if a student is taking AP courses, do they get the quality points? Do they get, credit for, a particular course, advanced course at their university level? And then how does this impede or support the student?
I'm going to let you speak in a second, Dr. Ahmed, but I do want to say before we head this on, it would be really good to see what kinds of parameters this committee is going to would approach. How would they approach? How big would it be? How many topics is it going to cover before even go and find the people? Because I think it could be a huge mess, to be quite frank. And I'm hopeful, but I'm and all. Dr. Ahmed, did you really want to say something? No?
I really want to say something.
Good.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just 1 minute. Haley, you mentioned about the grading being one outcome or one measure or one data point. And another thing, like in 2.3 working, there is task force working on a high quality instruction or material. So I think measuring an outcome or grading an outcome need is also to be coupled with like what is that thing that we're giving to the students, and what is that high quality instruction or curriculum that the students are receiving, so that we are measuring. And so whether we measure in pounds or whether we measure in kilograms, either way we need the growth to see. So what are the feed, what is the things that they're getting? It's another data point as well that we need to be like, because what we have in the high schools is that there's no aligned curriculum, so that to really, other than the AP courses and the college courses that the students are taking, but most there is no alignment. And as Dr. Opperman mentioned, even within the same department, maybe there in high schools it will be like different kind of ways of or quality curriculums. So a teacher-made curriculum. So I we want to just put it out there as we think about that measure of the output or the outcomes, also how we can think about that those things to be in tandem, because what we give to them is what we are measuring. And as far as the three high schools, although they use almost like different ways of measuring grades, yet there is no like one where we will say like, yes, this is the way to go. But because we see they're knocking out of the park and this is the best way, we don't see that the outcomes are almost like really like reflective of all the schools. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mickey, I don't mind going past 9, but
Yes, yeah. Just
no.
quickly, thank you, thank you. Just quickly, because I was just thinking what I said earlier when I asked Pamela about the professional judgment, especially on the grading. But because I came from different system of schooling, I came from European system and African system. So they used to have the 1 and 4, and they used to have the 1 to 100. So everything was depending on the value of the work of each teachers. So I mean, and that's exactly what I want us to make sure. Then we see, are we going just to go with a district grading system to have everybody just grading the same thing? Or are we going to value also each teacher work the way they are defining their own grading system? Because the same teacher can grade differently for 1 to 3, and the other one can do the same thing to a different school. I mean, the inequity gonna still be on balance there. So are we addressing that? So both should be on the same ways about the best quality practices or the quality from each teacher when they're grading, because I face that being the European side and so I saw exactly how the way it play out on my own grading and my own achievement. So it was a big question about the work value from each
Well, and
teacher. Yes.
work value of the student, Mickey, because if a teacher says, well, I'll just give everybody 90s, that's also a probability of happening. But anyway.
All right. So we really
Thank you.
need to pay, we need to pay attention about the quality of our teaching in each specific classroom. So where we can, make sure that we have the value, equity value, or what we are educating and providing to our student before grading it. Yeah.
So there are multiple levels to this, which is a concern. So I think we're going to be wrapping up pretty quickly, but at this point, I know Haley would love to know if this is going to happen. I would really entertain hearing from you, Haley, and Dr. Proctor, excuse me, that we have, an idea of what you're thinking about this, how this would be approached. Because I think that's really important before we move, say, oh yeah, and I think, Mickey, I think your point is in the back of this is what's it's another area, which is called, what is our teaching evaluation system going on, which there is one, so that isn't the same thing, but I think Haley's point of big problems is understandable. Is there any last comment? Because I'm looking at it, it is 9:00. Anything anyone wants to say? Well, then I would entertain. Oh, did you just want to say something, Jesse? I thought you were going to say something.
Oh, no,
So
I'm good, thanks.
okay, I would say that entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, and second, and so let's vote. Wish to adjourn. And thank you. And I will get back, Haley and Dr. Proctor, about where we move on this. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.